It seems like there's constant questions every year, every month, and almost every week of where Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be playing football. Whether that's going to be for the Cleveland Browns, the rumors surrounding him potentially being traded to another team, and now this morning, the NFL dropped a bomb. The Minnesota Vikings apparently are interested in acquiring Odell Beckham Jr., and there have reportedly been talks between the Vikings and the Browns for an Odell Beckham trade. We don't really know the exact details of what's going on, but to me, this is another where there is smoke, there is fire situation. And I think if we learned that if there's smoke, there is fire over the past offseason, the Tom Brady situation kind of gave us, usually these rumors are actually true in the NFL. Like, these sort of things do not get leaked without some actual knowledge and basis behind it. I'm going to break down why the Minnesota Vikings should trade for Odell Beckham Jr. and why any team in the NFL that needs a wide receiver should trade for Odell this season in this upcoming draft. But before I do break down the potential trade between the Browns and the Vikings for Odell Beckham Jr., make sure that you do, of course, spike the like button and subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this. NFL free agency, draft, and speculation covered here on the Bottom Line View. Comment your opinion below. Do you want your team to potentially acquire Odell? Do you want to stay away from Odell Beckham Jr.? And if you're a Vikings fan, let me know what your thoughts are on potentially trading for Odell in the comment section below. What are my thoughts on Odell Beckham Jr. potentially being traded from the Browns to the Vikings? First thought is, this is interesting. Like, right off the top, they just traded Stefon Diggs, okay? And to me, Stefon Diggs and Odell are pretty similar players. While I do think, and we'll get into this, that Odell is an upgrade over Diggs, and I think he's a more talented NFL receiver, I feel like, okay, now we have the answer officially why Diggs was traded. It was because of his personality. If these rumors are true, that Odell and this trade could potentially happen, right? Assuming that. I believe that Odell Beckham Jr. would be a big upgrade over Diggs. And that's not saying that Diggs is not a great receiver. I think Diggs is a really good receiver. I would put him somewhere in the top 15, top 10 type receivers in the NFL. But when you're talking about Odell Beckham Jr., which I feel like over the last couple of years has been soured and a lot of people haven't put him in that same conversation, this guy legitimately has the talent and has shown throughout long stretches in his career that he is potentially the most talented receiver in the NFL. And he potentially, if in the right situation at the right time, could be the best receiver in the NFL. And honestly, Hall of Fame talent, and early on in his career, Hall of Fame resume. Odell Beckham Jr. is on a different level from Stefon Diggs. And what I mean by this is when you compare their games, they're both excellent route runners. But I think Odell is just a little bit better. I think Odell might be 1 or 2 or 3 in the NFL in terms of route running. And I think Diggs is right underneath that. When you look at the speed, game-breaking speed, there are not many players at the receiver position that are more difficult in regards to what an impact they make on an offense and on the opposing defense than Odell Beckham Jr. Odell will force double teams, will force a safety over top, and will force you to play off coverage more often than not. You cannot simply say we're going to have one corner on a receiver all game long on Odell because he's too explosive. It's in the same category as like Tyreek Hill and those type of guys where you can't put them on an island because you're going to get burnt all day long. Beckham has that edge in terms of explosive ability, both without the ball in terms of a route runner and getting open and separation and downfield speed, but also with the ball in their hands. And I think that might be the biggest separator between Odell and a guy like Diggs, where Diggs is excellent as a route runner, getting open, creating separation, catching the football, body control, all of that. And while he might be just a little bit underneath Odell in all of those areas, I feel like where Odell separates and where he's like one of the 3 best in the game right now is he can catch the football on a 5-yard slant and potentially take that to the house or create a massive play out of it. And there's just not a lot of guys in the NFL at receiver, tight end, running back, playmakers in the NFL that can do that. And that's something that Odell possesses that's very, very rare. Not only to be a downfield receiver that he is and has incredible hands, body control, and all of that, but also the ability to create a slant into a touchdown. And that's very rare. Like, he has the Tyreek Hill skill set, but he also has the Julio skill set. And honestly, he might be the only guy in the NFL now that Antonio Brown is gone, that Odell Beckham Jr. is the only guy potentially in the league that has both of those skill sets. So when you're talking about Odell, clearly he's a rare talent, he's a rare player, and if you're going to acquire him, he's going to bring something to your offense that not a lot of players in the NFL can actually duplicate. He's special. End of story. When you take a look at his statistics, I mean, they line up with the specialness. When you take a look at this past season, I think a lot of people would look at this past season and just without looking at the numbers and saying, you know, Odell disappointed. He wasn't really that great this year. A lot of things happened and he just didn't really live up to the hype of what we expected from him. And I would agree with that. I still think when you look at the numbers, you know, they weren't as sexy as they probably should have been. He still, though, put up over 1,000 yards. He still had 74 catches and 4 touchdowns. And throughout the course of his career, every season he's been able to play at least 12 games, he has had 1,000 yards. He's only had one season in his career where he hasn't had 1,000 yards. And in that season, he had his season cut short and missed the rest of the year, only playing 4 games. So for me, Odell, like early in his career, 3 seasons in with the Giants, was on pace to being one of the greatest receivers of all time. 3 seasons in a row, over 10 touchdowns, 3 seasons in a row, over 1,300 yards, 100 reception season in there. And then even with the Giants in his last year with the Giants with a really, really bad Eli Manning, he still put over 1,000 yards. He still had 6 touchdowns. And with the worst downfield quarterback in the NFL, he was still putting up those numbers. And when you look at the Vikings, I mean, they have Kirk Cousins. And I think Kirk Cousins at this point in his career is more talented than any quarterback that Odell has ever had, whether that's Baker last year or that's Eli Manning. Even in the early days of Odell's career, 2014, 2015, I'd say Kirk is superior in terms of his game than Eli was at that point in his career, in terms of arm strength, in terms of downfield passing ability, in terms of touch and accuracy, in terms of mobility to escape pocket and move up and throw within the pocket. I mean, Kirk Cousins is a really underrated passer. You know, you may have different things and opinions about Kirk Cousins in terms of his ability to win big games and perform in the clutch. But when it comes to actually passing the football with touch accuracy and arm strength, all of those things Kirk Cousins possesses that are a step ahead, a step above an Eli Manning or a Baker Mayfield. Odell Beckham Jr., if he is traded, and that is the trade that the Vikings could potentially get, I mean, you're talking about a complete steal. I tweeted this earlier in the day. You might not even have a top 10 pick in this draft, even with this receiver class, and be able to get a receiver of the caliber and potential and skill set of Odell Beckham Jr. That is how rare his talent is. But if you get him for a second and a fifth, you get him for a second and a fifth, not even a first-round pick. There is no possible way in any draft ever that you are going to absolutely bank on a second-round pick being at the same level of talent, physical talent, of Odell Beckham Jr. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to see it. You're going to have to luck into some crazy, out-of-this-world steal of a pick late in the draft to ever find somebody of that caliber. So the likeliness of you finding an Odell in the second round or past that is absolutely asinine and crazy and ridiculous, that a team that would think that value is respectable for the amount of talent that Odell has. If the trade really is Odell for a second and a fifth or anything of that nature without giving up a first-round pick, You just traded Stefon Diggs for a first plus a lot more picks. So either way, the Vikings would be making out with an incredible deal. Because as I already stated, I believe Odell is more talented than Diggs. And again, while I believe Diggs is very talented, I believe Odell's on a different stratosphere, a different planet than Diggs is. But when you look at the actual capital and draft capital the Vikings possess right now, it's kind of sneaking under the radar. I mean, they have 2 first-round picks, 22nd overall, 25th overall. They have a second-round pick at 58th overall, and they have 2 third-round picks. So the Vikings could do a lot with this draft. And I think what the trade for Odell would actually enable them, let's say if it's the 58th overall and a 5th-round pick, which was suggested by multiple reporters, that would be amazing. Because you would have Thielen, Odell, you wouldn't have to really worry about the receiver position then. Maybe you could go and draft one in the 3rd round, potentially later as your 3rd receiver, whatever you want to do there. And you could just spend your 1st round, your 22nd and 25th overall picks on offensive line and corner. And we know that the Vikings need both of those positions. Or you could spend both on the offensive line, or you could spend both on the corner position. Whatever they wanted to do, or whatever they're planning on doing. But to be able to get a talent like that in win now mode, which the Vikings are in right now, they're in win now mode. They're trying to win the Super Bowl as we speak right now. So that's why the Diggs trade, I kind of looked at it as a loss, even though they got great capital back and they got a lot of picks and they got a lot of resources back for Diggs. They're in win now mode. They're trying to win the Super Bowl. This is the reason why they signed Kirk Cousins. They have a very talented roster right now. They made the playoffs last year. They shocked the Saints in the 1st round. I think, honestly, if you're able to, which would make a lot of sense and be in line with win now mode to get Odell, but also to be able to spend those 1st round picks to get different positions and players that can contribute right away, which are day 1 picks, right? In the 1st round to your secondary, which you need a massive upgrade at the corner position, or your offensive line, which has been a big weakness for you for a while now. I feel like that would be just the perfect scenario for the Vikings. So any Vikings fans out there that don't understand this trade or don't want Odell, I think you're absolutely out of your mind. Because 1, he's extremely talented. He's put up the numbers. He's been on pace to be one of the greats. He's really, in terms of his attitude, I think this is the reason most fans don't want him, right? Am I correct there? If you're sitting there and you're saying, yeah, but Mitch, I don't want him because we just dealt with Diggs and he was kind of a drama queen and all that, and we don't want to deal with that. Well, for me, I've always never really understood the whole Odell thing. Like, he's never really had any issues off of the field. He's not Antonio Brown. Like, on the field, he had that one thing with Josh Norman, but I think really, he hasn't. I've never seen it. I've never understood it. I feel like it's just because of his popularity, which he's probably, other than Tom Brady, the most popular player in the NFL. And I know that he does have the biggest social media following. So he's an extremely popular player. So also from that sense, I feel like it would bring the Vikings a little bit of buzz from a team perspective. But I've never gotten it. I've never understood it. And I think if you still are not with me here, I want to bring you to one quote in particular. And I think this actually had a lot to say about where Odell is at in terms of his maturity as a player on and off the field and how he's learned from his career so far. Odell Beckham dealt with a pretty severe injury this past season with the Browns. He dealt with a sports hernia injury. And actually, this injury was diagnosed before the season even began. He was supposed to or should have gotten a surgery in training camp, which would actually have helped his entire season, the production, and the team itself. But instead, the trainers misdiagnosed the injury, and he wasn't able to get that surgery until the season was basically over in January, and then his production suffered because of it. But what we didn't see from Odell, which is probably what we would have saw from a different receiver in the NFL, maybe a diva prototype receiver, we didn't hear Odell complain. We didn't hear him speak to the media about how he's hurt or how he's not able to play the way he would like to until after the season. And then we finally understood, oh, that's why Odell doesn't really quite look as fast or as quick or whatever it may be. This is the quote that Odell had in terms of him and the media. I think myself as well had a slice of humble pie this year because I was hurt all year. I couldn't really say I was hurt. I didn't want to make it seem like I'm having an excuse, but I really couldn't do what I wanted. I just couldn't move the way that I wanted to, so I think that's why I'm more motivated than ever. This is probably day 9 or 10 after surgery, and I'm just starting to move around and just mentally get ready for the process all over again and just put my best foot forward. So that's Odell Beckham Jr. on his latest injury and the injury that really held him back from putting up big time numbers. But notice that Odell still played 16 games last year. Notice that Odell still played through that injury and did not take any time off and played for the team. But yet, nobody gave him any respect or kudos for doing that, even though a different player in a different situation probably would have taken many games off and not played. So that's Odell Beckham Jr. on his injury. To me, what this says about Odell is basically that the guy is not only tough and willing to play for his team, but he's also changed his mindset when it comes to being a teammate and being an NFL player. If you did have those questions about him earlier in his career, I don't think they exist anymore because he's willing to sacrifice for his team with this injury. And even though he wasn't going to put up that big time stat line that everybody wanted to see from him and probably was taking a lot of slack from Browns fans and fantasy owners and all of it. If you've ever been there as an athlete or anything in terms of playing through an injury, it's almost worse than not playing at all because you're out there, but you're not actually able to do what you want to do on the field. And I think that's what Odell is going through, but also at the same time, I think it shows the guy has grown as a person and as a player. So that was a big quote for me in terms of his growth, and I think that totally sold me on, if I did ever have the questions about him, that right there, I didn't think we would see him play through injury if he didn't care about more than himself and was not just a selfish player. My opinion on the Vikings and Odell is that they need to trade for him. If this is the trade that's on the table, I would have done that as soon as it was requested or asked of me. I would have picked up my phone and said, yes, sir, right away, send the guy over, do whatever it takes to get this guy in our building. Because not only are the Vikings, would that put them into the conversation of the NFC elite, but they would be able to have the most capital and build the roster that they would like to build through the draft without really sacrificing a lot. And even if it were, to me, trading one of your first round picks and keeping the 2nd and the 5th for Odell, I would still do that as well. Now, if it were to be like a similar Diggs type of trade, I don't really see the same value there. If you're the Browns, I don't think it makes sense because you're trading a guy for way less than what you traded for him. So it's just trading him at the minimum floor value, which I don't understand ever. Odell Beckham Jr. is an elite talent. Odell Beckham Jr. is a great player. Odell Beckham Jr. does not get the respect he deserves in terms of the teammate and leader he is on the field. He would be an excellent fit for Minnesota and carry along the lineage of the great receivers for the Vikings. Guys, Gronk, spike the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's Mitch of TheBottomLineView. Comment below your opinion about Odell to the Vikings.